All right, class. Last video for tic-tac-toe, we finished a fair chunk of it. I believe we finished initializing the board. We finished printing the board. And then we were able to actually put pieces in that board. And as you can see, that's fairly lengthy. The actual input was from 39 to yeah, about 100 lines of code, give or take, even if I took out the extras. And then we just had a simple loop dealing with our main for the moment. Now, so far we've covered the board, displaying the board, what turn it is. It goes the full 9 turns that we need. Now it's time. We got players, we filled the board with X's. Now we have to swap the players. So just to reiterate what we did last time, and hopefully you've got this done already, we've set up a board, and I can fill the entire board. It doesn't really care who wins yet. But as you can see, it fills it up. It displays that it's tied. And I've got a print display board here at the end of my main game loop here that displays this last little one here. And it's only going to say you've tied when we exit this loop here, at least for the moment. There are several other ways to do this, but how we're doing it now, basically this only occurs when we fill the entire board and nobody is won. So I have a little if here to check for wins and things like that. All that later. So first, let's go ahead and try to swap players. We've got X's and O's, right? So this entire if statement that I've got here, if player equals X, if player equals X, and this could be nested, if player equals X, if M equals 1, I decided to compound it to make it a little less verbose. This could actually be 200 lines if I nested it, each one of these. But basically what I've got to do, I've got the first if that checks to see if it's within range. And the next set of ifs are if player equals X. So basically I'm going to do the same exact thing, except it's going to be for player is O. So what I'm going to have to do is just copy all these ifs. And before we get into it, yes, there is a better way, of course. In fact, I could do all this in just like 10 lines of code if I wanted to. But I'm doing it the long way to make it a little more illustratable, I guess you could say. So this else is going to be here. I'm just going to move that down some. So you should have pretty much the same code I've got. So at the bottom of this, just scroll down to the bottom of our input here, our check move, and just make that else move down. And this should be the bottom of else if m equals 8 and player equals x. And then I have this else. And then another else if 0 through 8 wasn't picked. So what I'm going to do is, from this point on, I'm just going to come up and copy all this. A lot of copy and paste up to m0 and equals x. So I'm going to copy. And I'm just going to come down here and paste it. Now that will, of course, double the size of this method. But that's okay. It's still going to work for what we want it to do. Now, here we go. Scroll back up until you see if m equals 0, and then m equals 8 would be the last x. Basically, what I'm going to have to do is just go in here and change to, let's see here, x to O, x to O, x to O, x to O. And I just go down here. Now, this is a common area where if you accidentally skipped one of these, which is very, very likely, you'll start filling out your X's and O's, and you'll find out it does weird things like put an X in 2 places where it isn't supposed to. There we go. Cute. Now notice I said if they equal 5. I could have alternatively said if they don't equal X or if they don't equal O. So there's actually 2 ways to kind of represent that. So we go down, doot, doot. And I'm using capital O. It does matter whether it's capital or lowercase, but there we go. So what this is going to do, and I'll move you back up here, this should allow me to check for O's. Now, there is a slight problem here, and that is, I'm putting my O in the slot, but I'm not actually swapping any players yet. Now, I do have this player variable up here called X. Let me just go ahead and minimize this. Well, I'll just scroll through it real quick for those. Oh, and I should be forthcoming here. I should have said this at the start, but I'm going to be using a lot of copy and paste here. So if you need to pause the video or anything like that, obviously pause. If you copy and paste and all of a sudden a bunch of red lines pop up, you've probably screwed something up. But if I write all this out line by line, not only is that most likely going to screw something up, it's also going to take me quite a long while. So you guys can go ahead and pause as you need to double check everything. 8, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then my else again. And that should never happen. If I go in here, it's going to be an 8, 0 through 8. It's going to be an X or an O. So this is actually not completely necessary. I just got it in there just in case. And then, of course, we have our big else, which goes all the way up to this first statement here, if it's within the range. So there we go. Now, and of course, my comments are wrong down here now. It probably wouldn't hurt to fix those. It's actually O. So I'll just go ahead and do that just because it doesn't look good when you have the comments wrong. So O, O. Now there is a find and replace, which you have to be extremely careful with it. Because I may find and replace, and it would replace everything, like literally everything. If I want to swap X's to O's, it'll change every X to an O, even if it's like in the middle of a variable. So you got to be really cautious with that. Now, there's a problem. My check moves 200 lines now. I come down in here, I make a move, I do Boolean check, right? Now there's a couple of ways to approach the actual swapping of players. What I've done up here is I've kind of started it. I've got it set so it will allow me to put X's and O's. But in order to put an O in there, the player has to be O, which means I have to swap the player. Now I can do that here, which means, once I've done this, I can say player equals O. And that swaps the player for me. I can also do it in the main. We can do some checks down here to swap the players. Now, if I do it here, I'm going to have to do it for every single one of these. O, O. And as you can see, with however many statements there are, there's quite a few of them, 9 of them, 18 total. That would be 18 more lines of code I'm going to have to add, which is basically just player equals O, and then down here, player equals X, just swapping them back and forth. Now, I can actually do this a little bit with a little bit less work. So if I erase that, I know I said I was going to do it the absolute longest way, but I think 200 lines is pretty long already. We can do it down here, though, because if check is true, then I can swap players here. So if check, I can check to see, let's just say if check, and that means if check is true, and player equals X. Well then, player equals O. Else if check and player equals O, then player equals X. So we'll see if that works. And if. Now if check fails, that means it won't swap the player. If check fails, it won't swap the player. I don't necessarily need an else here. because I already have some of this displayed down in here. If I try to put something in here, it's going to tell me it's already occupied, try again. So some of this could actually be moved up to here, technically, depending on how I set it up. But this saves me about, 20 lines of code probably, maybe 15 or so. So we could be a little lengthier, but I'm going to go ahead and just shorten that part so you can see it there. The rest of this is still going to be pretty long. As you can see, we're almost at 300 lines of code. Now, since we have one more thing to deal with, and that is to basically see who won, the win conditions, then this is going to be another maybe 100 or so lines of code. But it's going to be mostly copy and paste. Now, according to our chart we did last time, if I use a two-dimensional array, I just need to know what numbers I need. So, for example, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2. If all those are x, then I win. If all those are x, I win. If all those are x, I win. Going vertical, going diagonal. There are a grand total of 8 possible win conditions for x and 8 for o. So there are 16 total ifs that we can use. Now I can use nested, but compound is honestly better for what we're doing here. So let's go ahead and check for wins. Now I'm just going to make a method called win. I don't have it yet, but I'm going to throw it in there. I'm going to put my win up here under check move. Public static Boolean win. And the reason I'm making it a Boolean is, well, to return if I've won or not. So in this case, I probably want to say Boolean win equals win. And you can use the same name like this. That's a variable name. This is a method name since it has those little parentheses around it. If that's too confusing for me, you can call it win check. And that basically will be true if I won, false if I didn't. So I can actually use that to end the loop early, or exit out of the whole program, or however I want to do it. So let's scroll on up. So win. So how do we decide, if we won? Well, I need to check my board. This is one of the reasons I put this up here. You can see the board right here. If board 0, 0 equals x. So I'll do x's first. X wins. So if board 0, 0 equals x, and board 0, 1 equals x, and board 0, 2 equals x. Now you can see it's a little bit lengthy. I could do nested, but that really is going to get long. If board 0 equals x, inside that if this equals x, inside this if this equals x. It's just better just to do the compound here. So basically, x wins. And I can return true. Like so. Now to do the rest of these, I just simply have to copy and paste. Copy, paste. And this is where the copy and paste comes into play. 1, 1, 1. You can check the difference. And this is where patterns are very, LTiff. There we go. Although for this, it really wouldn't matter if it was an if or an else if, because I'm returning it. Once one of these is true, it's not going to check the others anyway, but it's still better to do the else ifs. So this right here would be my horizontals. Now my verticals, and I'll just say x wins horizontal. And of course we need our x wins vertical. There we go. And I could put a comment there and do my else if underneath that. Since it ignores the comment, it's basically the same as it just being right here. So else if, and I'm just going to copy and paste what we got here. Just copy and paste. This is where copy and paste can be your greatest ally or worst enemy if you do this wrong. So I'm looking for the verticals. So 0, 0, 1, 0. And it's also a place where you can royally screw up if you're not careful. 2, 0. But you will notice that there is a pattern as I go across. What increases? If I go down, what increases? And a lot of times you can use those patterns to effectively just, you know, cut all this work in half. So what increases when I go to the right? The second number does. 1, 1, and 1. And then we just copy paste it again. And that's going to be 2, 2, and 2. Like so. Oh, wait. Now, well, no, this will be fine. I was going to say we should probably have the board print here, but I can probably do that down here when I check for the win, have the board displayed. So this gives me my verticals, the 3, my horizontals, the 3. That means I need diagonals next. I'm just going to move that down. X wins diagonal. Else if, and I'll just go ahead and just copy this instead. We'll just go this way. Doot. So the diagonals, let's take a look. And again, if you copied and pasted something and all of a sudden this happens, you screwed something up. Undo it and see what you did wrong. 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0. This is where having a good map that you can kind of follow really cuts your time in half when you're working on stuff. So 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2. That's one diagonal. And then we copy paste. And this is going to be 0, 2, 1, 1, and 2, 0, I think. And even going diagonal, if I had a much bigger map, you will see that there are certain patterns when you go in a diagonal. So, like this goes here, both of them increase. Both of them increase. If I go, up at an angle, one decreases, one increases, depending on the direction you're going. If I go down or if I go up, if I go down, it does the opposite. So those little patterns are really easy ways to figure out effectively how to shorten these. So I'm just going to, now I've got all this, all my x's should work. And you see it's still giving me an error because I haven't finished everything. At this point, it would probably be better to just go return, false down here. And then test the x's to make sure the x's win. Which I have not been doing. I should have checked to make sure my x's and o's worked. So that's the problem with coding for a while. You get so used to doing things that you're pretty sure you did it right. But I'm just going to go ahead. I haven't checked the wins yet, so well, actually, I think I have technically for the x's. 0, 1. All right, it swapped. 2, 3, 4, 5. Now 6 should end as a win. X wins, but notice it's still going. 8. All right, X wins that way too. So it worked, kind of, sort of. The reason it's still going is because this loop is set to go, and I'm not doing anything with this check yet. I'm just running it. The only time it ends currently is when my turn count reaches the max. So, and then it'll say you're tied, which it did. So it's working. It swapped all the players as I went through it. And a good test would also be to make sure that if I pick the same spot twice, it doesn't stick to the same letter, for example. There we go. Because sometimes, if you're not careful, it won't swap players, and you'll put like an X and an X or an X, or it'll swap when it's not supposed to, so it's always good to check that. So I tell you to do things So I tell you to do things and then I don't do it. Uh, Such a terrible teacher. But I caught myself. Uh, and honestly, especially when you're early programming, you really should test every single thing you're doing. Like always check and make sure that what you just wrote works. So, ideally I would write this check here and I would run and check it. Maybe I would do like a whole set or a couple of them, like the first row, and I would check and make sure it filled those. Then I would add in the next few. And once I felt comfortable, I could go ahead and paste, and then I would check all of them. That's generally how you'd want to do it. For the win conditions, I've got all my x's. So we simply just have to kind of copy and paste this. Copy. And I could do another if I wanted to, or I could do this as an else if. It honestly doesn't matter. O wins. Horizontal. Now, I'm just going to paste. The reason I can do an if here is because if all these ifs fail, I mean, none of them worked, it's not going to return. And it's just going to go here anyway. So it's kind of an implied else, but I mean, you could add the else there if you wanted. And then it would go down one at a time still. It really wouldn't affect anything having that if here. But whatever works best for you. Having that, honestly, doesn't make any difference for what we're doing. So this is O, and what I have to change is the O's. O wins. There we go. I come here. O wins. I just got to go down here and don't even have to change anything else because we're doing the exact same thing. Now that could be a good hint on how to shorten this. These 16, 17 ifs that I've got right here could very, very easily just be, 3 or 4. With maybe a couple of loops here and there. So let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and mark these as O's. And again, I'm using capital for mine. If you're using capital, make sure it's capital. And that's not the number 0, but the letter O. There we go. So now O should be able to win too. And then, of course, I could have an else. Nobody won. And I don't really have to alliterate that like that. Alt-Shift-F lines everything up. I want to make sure end if, and this would be the end of the win condition. So all of my win conditions written out. And that is a grand total of 60 lines of code. I'm just going to scroll through it decently in case you couldn't keep up or you need to check something. Then we get to our O's, and I probably should check that's an O, and that's an O. There we go. So there's our total, and this should actually finish our game. So let's see. Oh, wait, nope. One thing. I am running, it's going to tell me who wins, but the game doesn't actually end yet. So if win check. And I can say if win check equals true, or I can just say if win check. Either way, whichever you like better. If win check, that means someone won. Someone won. So I need to quit the game, basically. Now, to just force close the game, I can use system.exit 0. And this force closes the game. So basically, it's not going to run anything else. It's just going to close down Java, basically. Else, really, nobody won. So I'm already displaying who won, X won. I am not printing the board, though, so I should probably go ahead and do that. Display board. There we go. And there really isn't any need for an else, because if I'm the first player and I make my first move, I'm obviously not going to win. I don't need to have something display saying, hey, you didn't win. Like, yeah, I know. It's the first move. You can't win until you get to move 3. And I could put in a little extra stuff here that made sure we were at least at room at move 3 if I wanted to. But honestly, it's not going to take that much out of the code. If I was doing this like every second or something, some massively large program, then that would make a big difference. But for what we're doing, it really isn't. So let's take a look. I added this little bit here. Enter my x. All right, let's do this. 4. Enter my o. 0. Now, if I type in, you know, something obscene, it's going to tell me it's not a choice. Now notice it says please enter your x every time. I'm going to have to change that. That's why we want to test these. 1. Okay, I'm going to block that 7. I'm going to hit 3. I'm going to hit 5. I'm going to hit 2. I'm going to hit 6. I'm going to hit 8, which gives us basically every tic-tac-toe game possible. It's a tie. Now I'm going to actually try to win. So I'm just going to hit 0, 3, 1, 4, 2. So x1. All right, so let's check for O. 0, 1, 3, 4, 2, 7. 0 wins, or O wins. So it works, at least for those few that we checked. I might want to be a little more cautious and check a couple more just to make sure, but I'm fairly certain it's working. So we do have one issue, and that is please enter your X. Now I can fix this a couple of different ways. There is one way where I just change something in this print statement. I'm going to let you think about that. It's actually not that hard. So I really don't have to add anything more to it. If you want to do it a slightly longer way, which isn't necessary, I can say if player equals X, print out that line. Else, I can print out the line and just say, enter your O. That's the other way to do it. But it's slightly longer than the other way. Alt-Shift-F. But I mean, it's just indif. If you like this better, you're more than welcome to do it this way. But I do have a way where I can print off whose turn it is without using the if statement. You might want to check back in here and see what that is. But I'll let you think about that. So our end program ends up being about 350. It could have easily been about 20 or 30 lines more. I did take 1 or 2 little shortcuts. For example, like with swapping the players, I could have added another 20 lines quite easily, actually. So let's see if this does what it's supposed to do. All right, please enter your O. Please enter your X, 2, 3, random, 5, and that checks another one. Okay. It worked, it ended, the game was over. Boom. There is your tic-tac-toe. Now I'm just going to open everything up and scroll through it one more time in case you got some issues. And then that'll be it. It's entirely up to you to get it all copied. So we start at the top and we scroll our way down. And again, comment your braces. It seems like tedious, needless work, I know, but it really does help when you are debugging a program. And there actually are options to step through the code and watch it go through it line by line. So you can see where it is if it fails. Our wins. Now, if I had a much bigger board, I would obviously need more wins. And this is not the most efficient way to do that, obviously. I am not choosing to do this in the most efficient manner. I'm choosing to do it in a fairly inefficient manner because it's usually easier to understand. So this entire program is 350 odd lines of code, but it can actually be about 80 lines of code. Definitely under 100. So there's a lot of places in here where I could honestly just like cut out a whole bunch of lines. Like this check move here could very easily just be 3 or 4 lines of code. maybe 5 or 6 at most, instead of the 100 and something, 200 or something odd that it is now. The same is true for the win. That could literally be probably about 10 lines of code. The game, I don't know that I could squeeze it much shorter. I could definitely squeeze that place shorter. Uh, this really wouldn't change too much, I think. The rest of it would kind of be the same. All right, there you go. There is your tic-tac-toe round 2 the long way. If you have any questions or problems, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you in the next class or the next video.